Good morning. My name is Kevin, and we're going to continue this journey through the book of Acts as we look at chapter 18 this morning. So, I'm the first church planting resident at Mission Church, and so I just want to say thank you for what happened this past Sunday. John got up and asked everybody to give $100 in this prompted give to start a new church in West Chicago called Renewal Church. And in those 4 minutes, if everyone would have given, we would have raised $20,000. And I get the opportunity to tell you that in those 4 minutes, we raised over $42,000 to start a new church in West Chicago that exists for God's glory and the good of the neighborhood. So thank you for embodying this life of generosity and having wide open hands. And I really feel like as we're going through the book of Acts together, this is what it looks like. If it were to continue, this is what it looks like. People starting new churches together. And so thank you for that. Acts chapter 18, we're going to start at verse 1, but I want to ask this question as we do this. What circumstances are you facing today, or have you been going through over the past year that you really look at those and just you really don't believe that God can do anything with those? So what difficult circumstances are going on in your life that you just feel like are just a waste and that God can't do anything with? And I want you to hear me clearly on this. As we look at this, I don't want anyone to hear me minimizing any difficulty that you're going through. The pain of whatever circumstances is real, and so I don't want us to put on rose-colored glasses as we work through this question. But I want us to ask, through whatever circumstance is going on, what if God is preparing you to be fruitful in a whole new way? Not in spite of, but because of these difficult circumstances you are going through. So Acts 18 verse 1. After this, Paul left Athens and he went to Corinth, a new city, and he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. So this is the lens I want us to really read this passage through. There's this couple this Jewish couple that was forced to leave Rome because of their religious and ethnic background. So they're living as refugees, and they were forced to come to this new city. So they are in a difficult circumstance. It goes on to say, and Paul went to see them, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them, and he worked, for they were tent makers by trade. And Paul reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and he tried to persuade both Jews and Greeks. And so here we are in this city of Corinth with this refugee couple who, as we now know, that they were business people, and so their business was just ripped from their hands, and they're having to start all over again. And they come in contact with Paul, who just happens to have the same trade, tent making, and so they partnered up together, and they're working together. And, as it said, they are reasoning in the synagogue with the Jews, trying to persuade both Jews and Greeks that Jesus is the Christ. A little background on the city of Corinth. It was a wealthy city, but it was full of pride, as you read in other parts of the scriptures when it talks about Corinth. But it also had this temple outside of the city that was devoted to a goddess of love. And so literally there were thousands of women who would serve this goddess during the day, and every night they were dispersed throughout the region to act as prostitutes. And so Corinth, it was a wealthy city, but it was also a sex trafficking center for the entire region. So here are these three people, this refugee couple and Paul, and they're just trying to squeak out a living and share the gospel. So, and then here's what happens. Verse 6, they start doing this, and when they opposed and reviled him, it says, so as they're trying to reason with people that Jesus is the Christ, they're being opposed and reviled, it says. And so Paul it says he shook out his garments and he said to them, your blood be on your own heads, I'm innocent. So Paul's saying, I've done everything I can, you're in God's hands. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles. And so Paul makes a conscious decision to say, I'm going to try to reach the Gentiles from here. But he doesn't have to go far. Verse 7, and he left there and he went to the house of a man named Titus Justus, a worshiper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. So he just went next door. But listen to this. Verse 8, Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, he believed in the Lord, together with his entire household. And many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed. They believed too, and they were baptized. So we see this, that there's this opposition, but even in this opposition, there's this fruit that God is bearing through them. You could imagine Priscilla and Aquila in the midst of all of this, that they're wondering, can God, we've just been chased out of our home. Our lives, we're living on the run and just settled in this new place that is just totally different. And now we have to make a living. And they partner up with Paul, and they're actually seeing people come to Christ. Even in the synagogue, where everyone reviled him, but somehow through that, the ruler himself became a Christian. And then in verse 9, and the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent, for I am with you, even though you're in the midst of great difficulty and tough circumstances. I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you. And he goes on, God says this, for I have many in this city who are my people. And so Paul stayed there with this couple for 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. This is just a great picture of the kind of places and the kind of situation that God works in. It's never a smooth path, is it not? Life is full of difficulty. But here we can see that God, he doesn't work in spite of all this. He doesn't waste it, but it's precisely through all of this that God does something powerful. In a place where it's a sex trafficking city in the whole region, where God himself actually says, there's many people here who are my people. And he tells Paul and this couple that you are the ones who get to reap this fruit that I have begun to sow here in this great city. So what circumstances are you facing today? And what if God is actually preparing you for something fruitful in the midst of all of this? And it really, whatever circumstances you're in, whether we're content with it or not, through your job, even as we see here, they're tent makers, and they're still continuing to do that. That through life's difficulties, God is at work, not in spite of them, but precisely through them. I just want to end with this. There's this Mother Teresa, her autobiography, she looks back at her throughout her life, and she's just committed to living among the poor, and she talked about how many times she would have to beg for food herself just to make it, and even oftentimes go without it. Yet she looked back at these times of great difficulty and suffering, and it's during those times where Mother Teresa, she could see clearly that God was at work in people's lives, not in spite of all of the difficulties going on, but precisely through them. So Mother Teresa, she made a commitment not to avoid suffering and not to try to eliminate all the difficulties from her life, but because she knew it was that through these great times of distress that God showed himself faithful, and she saw that even her life and ministry was most fruitful. And so that was the same for them in the book of Acts. This was the same for Mother Teresa, and it's the same for us. That what if God is preparing you in whatever circumstances you're facing? What if he's preparing you for something fruitful? Because that's the gospel, is that God, in the greatest moment of darkness, when his son was being put to death upon a cross, it was in that moment of darkness, as Jesus walked through that and experienced death, that 3 days later God raised him from the dead. And out of that began this fruitful existence that 2,000 years ago that continues to go on today. And so we can trust that our suffering, our difficult circumstances, they're not a sign of God's absence or that he's against us, but that even God is using all of those things to begin to produce new fruit in your life and in the lives of people around you. So Mission Church, whoever's listening, love you guys. Continue on this journey. Read through the rest of Acts 18, and may the Lord bless you, and may you begin to see how he is at work through you, even through difficult circumstances and suffering.